Here's a powerful question, Father, having to do with our discussion of purgatory. This woman writes us, my daughter hung herself at the age of 42. My question is, where is she? With God in purgatory? Or has she committed the immortal sin? Maybe she means unpardonable sin as well, as condemned to hell for eternity. I hope you're able to answer my question and put my mind at ease. This is Linda. Thank you, Linda. We just want to say, obviously, we pray for your daughter and we pray for you. And Father, so what do you think?
Absolutely, we do pray for you. Yeah, there's. Let's go back again to the definition of mortal sin. You know, there's three components to that, as you probably remember from your Baltimore Catechism, and certainly from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And let's go through them, because you don't just get an automatic mortal sin. A mortal sin requires grievous matter. Now, suicide absolutely is grievous matter. So, I mean, no question about it. You probably can't get more grievous matter than suicide. But it's the other two dimensions of mortal sin that really have to be considered here. The first one is called sufficient reflection, and the third one is called full or complete consent of the will. And it's the third one that is, you know, there. Sufficient reflection has two components to it. And by the way, you can read about this in your Catholic Catechism there, or the Catechism of the Catholic Church. But just very briefly, sufficient reason has two components. The first thing is you have to know that something is sinful. So in other words, you basically, you can't be in ignorance of the sinfulness of suicide. Now, most people are not in ignorance of, you know, the sinfulness of suicide. The second component in sufficient reflection is that you actually, at the time that you are intending to commit suicide, is that you are cognizant of the sinfulness of what you are doing. Now you think to yourself, well, how could you not be? You know, oftentimes, you know, depressions can get incredibly bad. In fact, they can get so bad that they distort the reality of people, and I mean distort it to a point where they actually can talk themselves into believing that suicide might be a good, you know, or something of that nature. I mean, a good in the sense of a divine good. Now you think to yourself, oh my gosh, you know, clearly, you know, this is so warped. But you know, you really ought to take a look, you know, at you know, some works that are done with respect to suicide, and you know, to see the frame of mind that people can get in. It's not the frame of mind you have today. The third criterion of a mortal sin, and this is the crucial one, complete consent of the will. What that means is that there's no impediments to the free use of the will, or at least not an impediment that could obstruct the free and full use of your will. Now, boy, there are a lot of impediments to the free use of the will. Of course, there's the old one, the old external coercion kinds of things. Should you rob the bank? You know, a guy points a gun at you and says, if you don't rob this bank, I'll shoot you. So you rob the bank. Are you complicit? No, obviously there's external coercion there, and you're not complicit. But the far more important one for you, Linda, is the one that's the internal compulsions and the internal impediments or blocks to the free use of the will. A severe depression, can that be an internal, an interior blocking or impediment to the free use of the will? Absolutely. I mean, just read the descriptions of depression. You know, a variety of what we call the major psychological illnesses. For example, schizophrenia, where you're just not in in connection with reality, or paranoid schizophrenia, where you're actually seeing illusions of things. I mean, honestly, the devil or God, telling you to commit suicide. Of course, schizophrenia can be a major reason. Of course, bipolar disorder, which has on one extreme, the depression we just talked about, which can be a very severe depression, or on the other extreme, kind of a hyperactivity. Literally, you're out of your mind, sort of elated in a kind of a hyper mode.
Right.
Right. Could that obstruct the free use of the will? Yeah, absolutely, it could.
Right.
So really, one thing you might want to, you don't want to read this book, but it's a good book. It's called Freedom in Nature, The Voluntary and the Involuntary by Paul Ricoeur. And it's the definition of the involuntary, which you might want to read about. And there is a lot of impediments to the free use of the will. Even the scholastics admitted that certain kinds of ingrained habits could be an impediment to the free use of the will, and so forth. So this is I can't tell you your daughter's in purgatory or heaven for a fact, but I can say if one of these interior afflictions prevented her from having free use of the will, complete or full consent of the will, then I would be very certain that God would be helping her either in purgatory or helping her into the kingdom of heaven, because of course she was not in her right mind. Now, if somebody on the other hand decides, I'm gonna, hurt all of my relatives and friends because I hate them, and so they commit suicide, and for that reason, but they did it with full consent of the will, and what would that mean? I don't know, because is somebody really doing that with full consent of the will, killing themselves to lead everybody else into a kind of metaphorical hell? I mean, I don't know. Thank God I am not the judge, but I do know this: if there are compelling reasons, Linda, for thinking that your daughter was severely depressed or had these other kinds of impediments to the free use of the will, or felt yourself, in a bind, or there was so much pain in her life, that she's, oftentimes, contrite, as they're literally killing themselves to get out of their pain or something like that. God can certainly see through this, see the impediment to the free use of the will, and can help them through purgatory into the, by His grace into heaven. So that certainly is a possibility. So there's no automatic mortal sin without that analysis.
Exactly, and especially in this year of mercy, we should look to that as well.